Let go of him! I said let him go. Now. Thank you. It's over. Everyone calm down.
Take your hands off that glass. I was invited. Did I not make myself clear? Put it down. That crystal glass costs more than anything you could afford. The groom invited me. You were invited. A sharp laugh cut through the room like shattered glass. The groom wouldn't associate with someone like you. I'm a guest. You're just someone who wandered into a place where you don't belong. Lenora turned to the crowd, diamonds glittering around her neck. 300 guests watched. Some laughed, some filmed. No one spoke. Preston, get this man out of my daughter's wedding. They mocked him openly, searched his pockets, called him a thief, dragged him to the door. Then the billionaire groom walked in. Then the billionaire groom looked at the man in the cheap suit and said one word. No one in that room was prepared for what came next. Marcus Hale arrived at the Ashbourne estate in a yellow cab as guests were arriving. The driver pulled up behind a line of black sedans and a pearl-white Rolls-Royce. Marcus paid in cash, tucked the receipt into his breast pocket, and stepped onto the gravel drive. The estate sat on 42 acres of rolling Connecticut hillside. Stone columns framed the entrance. A fountain carved from Italian marble splashed softly in the courtyard. Valets in matching vests moved between vehicles like choreographed dancers, opening doors for women in gowns that cost more than some people's yearly rent. Marcus wore a navy suit, off the rack, clean, pressed, and old, but carefully maintained. His shoes were polished but creased at the toe. He carried no gift bag, no designer watch, no invitation visible in hand. To the people watching him, he looked more like a maintenance worker than an invited guest. A valet glanced at him, then looked away. Marcus walked through the front doors without stopping. Inside, the reception hall stretched out like a cathedral of wealth. Ceiling frescoes, orchids flown in from Thailand, round tables draped in ivory linen with gold-rimmed chargers at each setting. A string quartet played Debussy in the far corner. The air smelled like roses, expensive perfume, and old money. 300 guests filled the room. Hedge fund managers, real estate developers, society wives whose names appeared in charity galas and gossip columns. The Sterling family had made sure every seat belonged to someone who mattered, or at least someone who looked like they did. The Sterlings were Connecticut royalty. Lenora Sterling, mother of the bride, had built Sterling Properties into a $200 million empire of luxury condos and waterfront developments. Her late husband had started the business. She had tripled it. Her son Preston served as vice president and spent most of his time reminding people of that fact. The bride, Avery Sterling, was Lenora's pride. A Yale-educated art curator with a smile that photographers loved. She was marrying Nolan Pierce, a 31-year-old billionaire whose venture capital firm had turned 3 failing startups into household names remarkably quickly. The business press called him a prodigy, a man who seemed to turn impossible bets into winning ones. Forbes had put him on the cover twice. What almost no one at that wedding knew was who had believed in Nolan Pierce before the money, the headlines, and the success. Marcus found a seat near the back, not assigned to him, just empty. He sat down, folded his hands on the table, and waited. A waiter passed with a tray of champagne flutes. Marcus reached for one. "Those are for guests," the waiter said, pulling the tray back slightly. Marcus lowered his hand. "Of course." He asked for water instead. The waiter brought it in a plain glass. No ice, no lemon. Marcus sipped and watched. At the head table, Lenora Sterling held court. She moved between clusters of guests like a queen surveying her kingdom, kissing cheeks, adjusting boutonnieres, laughing at jokes that weren't funny. Her dress was emerald green, custom, with diamonds at the collar that caught the chandelier light every time she turned her head. Preston stood near the bar with 3 friends, all of them loud, all of them drinking scotch. He wore a charcoal suit with a pocket square that matched his mother's dress. His laugh was the kind that made people nearby go quiet. It was Preston who noticed Marcus first. He nudged one of his friends, nodded toward the back table, said something that made all 4 of them look at once. Then he walked to his mother. "Mom," Preston leaned close to Lenora's ear. "There's a man sitting at table 19. I don't recognize him." "Nobody does." Lenora turned. Her eyes found Marcus across the room. She studied him with the cold concentration. Someone might give a stain on white fabric. "Who is he?" "No idea." He came in through the front. No one stopped him. Lenora set down her champagne, smoothed the front of her dress. "I'll handle it." She crossed the room, every step deliberate. The string quartet shifted to a softer piece as if the music itself sensed something was about to happen. And Marcus Hale, who had built a fortune larger than every person in that room combined, sat at table 19 with a glass of plain water and waited for the woman in emerald to reach him. Lenora Sterling reached table 19 with deliberate steps. She counted them herself, a habit from decades of property showings where every stride communicated authority. Her emerald dress caught the candlelight. Her chin was high. Her eyes were locked on the man sitting alone with a glass of water. "Excuse me." Marcus looked up. "Good evening," he said. Lenora did not return the greeting. "May I ask who you are?" "Marcus Hale." "And how did you come to be here, Mr. Hale?" "I was invited." Lenora tilted her head. The diamond at her collar flashed. "Invited by whom exactly?" "The groom." She smiled, the kind of smile that had nothing to do with warmth. "Nolan doesn't know you." "Well, I'm sure there's been some confusion. This is a private event, very private. The guest list was curated personally." "I understand." "Then you'll understand that we need to verify." She turned and signaled to the wedding planner, a thin woman in a black dress carrying a tablet. "Marin, check the guest list." "The name is Hale." Marin tapped through her screen. Her eyes widened slightly. "He's on the list, Miss Sterling. Table 19, guest of the groom." Lenora's jaw tightened. A vein pressed against her temple. "There must be a mistake. It's right here, ma'am. Added by Mr. Pierce personally." Lenora leaned closer to Marin. Her whisper was not quiet enough. "I don't care what the screen says. Look at him. Does he look like he belongs here?" Marin said nothing. She lowered the tablet, clutched it against her chest, and stepped back. Lenora turned to Marcus again. She had recalibrated. The smile returned, but sharper now, like a blade dressed in silk. "Mr. Hale, I'm not sure how this happened, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. I can have someone arrange a car for you. A nice restaurant in town, perhaps. Our treat." "I'm fine right here," Marcus said. "Thank you." His calm politeness seemed to irritate her more than an argument ever could. She was not used to people declining her suggestions. In Lenora's world, suggestions were instructions. No one pushed back. Not contractors, not business partners, not family. Preston appeared at her side. He was 3 inches taller than his mother and 40 pounds heavier, most of it from gym sessions he talked about constantly. His scotch sloshed as he planted himself between Lenora and the table. The smell of whiskey cut through the roses. "What's going on? This gentleman says Nolan invited him." Preston looked Marcus up and down. He did not try to hide it. His gaze started at the creased shoes, traveled up the off-the-rack suit, paused at the plain watch on Marcus's wrist, and stopped at Marcus's face. "You know Nolan." "I do." "From where?" "Work." Preston snorted. "Work. What kind of work?" "Investment." "Investment." Preston turned to his mother with a grin that begged to be shared. "He says he's in investment." 2 guests at the adjacent table exchanged glances. One of them covered her mouth with her napkin. Preston turned back to Marcus. "What firm?" "My own." "Your own." He repeated everything like he was translating it into a language he could mock. "And what's it called?" "North Star Capital." Preston shrugged. He had never heard of it. That was enough for him. Not knowing the truth had never stopped Preston from acting certain. "Listen, pal. I don't know who let you in, but this wedding costs more than whatever you make in a decade. So how about you finish your water and find the exit before this gets embarrassing for you?" "Whoa." Marcus set down his glass. "I'd prefer to stay." "That wasn't a request." "I know." The exchange drew attention. Guests at nearby tables turned in their chairs. Nearby conversations faded until the room seemed to lower its own voice. A woman in a red dress pulled out her phone, not to call anyone, but to record. Her husband nudged her, but she kept filming. Lenora saw the phones. She recalculated, but not in the direction of caution. In her mind, removing Marcus quickly was the best way to contain the situation. The longer he sat there, the more people would wonder why a man in a cheap suit was sitting at a table meant for a venture capitalist from Greenwich. "Preston," she said quietly, "get the security team." Preston nodded and walked toward the service entrance. He finished his scotch on the way and set the empty glass on a passing waiter's tray without looking. Marcus remained still. He did not fidget. He did not check his phone. He did not scan the room for an ally. He sat with the stillness of a man who had been in rooms like this before. Rooms where people decided what he was worth before he ever had the chance to speak. His hands rested flat on the ivory tablecloth. His breathing was even. A woman at the next table leaned toward her husband. Who is he? Nobody. Probably crashed the wedding. Should we say something? To who? Lenora's handling it. He looks harmless, not our business. That was the quiet agreement around the room. Lenora was handling it, and people had learned not to interfere when Lenora decided she was in control. Marin, the wedding planner, approached Marcus from the side. She crouched slightly so they were at eye level. Her face carried the tight expression of someone caught between conscience and paycheck. Sir, I'm sorry. I can confirm you're on the list, but Miss Sterling has asked you to leave. I heard what she asked. Would you like me to call Mr. Pierce? He's in the groom's suite getting ready for the reception entrance. No, Marcus said. Don't bother him. This is his day. Marin hesitated. She opened her mouth to say something else, then closed it. Then she stood up and walked away, her heels clicking faster than they needed to. 2 security guards arrived through a side door. They wore dark suits and earpieces and moved with a practiced calm of men paid to remove problems without making scenes. Preston walked behind them like a general, leading troops he hadn't earned. That's him, Preston said, pointing at Marcus with his index finger. The one at 19. The guards approached. One of them, a broad man with a shaved head and hands the size of dinner plates, leaned down. Sir, we've been asked to escort you out. On whose authority? The family's. The bride's family. Yes, sir. Marcus nodded slowly. And the groom. Was he consulted? The guard paused. Something shifted behind his eyes, a flicker of doubt that training taught him to suppress. Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us. I understand. Marcus stood. He buttoned his jacket with one hand, a small, precise movement. He picked up his glass of water, drank the last sip, and set it down gently on the ivory cloth without a sound. He did not raise his voice. He did not protest. He did not look at Lenora. He walked between the 2 guards with his shoulders straight and his chin level, like a man walking out of a boardroom, not a ballroom. Preston called after him. Hey! Marcus stopped. Preston held up a champagne flute. People like you don't drink champagne. He grinned. A few guests nearby laughed. Short, uncomfortable laughs, the kind people use when they know something is wrong, but choose to be entertained by it instead. A teenager at a far table was live streaming. The comment section was already filling up. Marcus looked at Preston for a long moment. His expression didn't change. Not anger, not shame. Something quieter, something that made Preston's grin falter for the briefest moment. Then Marcus turned and kept walking. Lenora watched from the center of the room. She adjusted her diamond collar, straightened her shoulders, and smiled at the nearest guest as if nothing had happened. So sorry about that, she said. You never know who wanders in these days. The guest nodded. You handled it beautifully, Lenora. Well, someone has to maintain standards. Across the room, Douglas Pierce, Nolan's father, stepped through the main entrance. He was late. His flight from Boston had been delayed by heavy fog, and he still had his overcoat folded over his arm. He scanned the room, saw Lenora holding court, saw Preston laughing near the bar again, and then saw something that made his stomach drop. 2 security guards walking a black man toward the exit. Douglas squinted, then his face went white. He started moving, fast. His overcoat fell off his arm. He didn't pick it up. Lenora. He reached her in 4 strides. Lenora, who is that man they're taking out? Some crasher. Preston and I handled it. Don't worry about it. What's his name? Hale or something. Why? Douglas Pierce's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. The blood drained from his face so completely that Lenora actually reached for his arm. Douglas, are you ill? Lenora, you need to stop them right now. Douglas, please. It's handled. That man is Marcus Hale. Yes, and Marcus Hale. The Marcus Hale. Founder of North Star Capital. He manages more than $12 billion in assets. He is the reason your son-in-law is a billionaire. He is the reason this wedding exists. Lenora blinked. The smile didn't disappear. It froze like a photograph of a woman who had just heard the floor crack beneath her. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not being ridiculous. I've met him twice at Nolan's office. He is Nolan's mentor, his first investor, his boss. Lenora's eyes darted toward the exit. The guards were almost at the door. Marcus was between them, still walking with that same steady, unhurried stride. But Douglas's words came too late. Or maybe they came exactly on time, depending on which side of the story you were standing on. Because at that exact moment, the double doors of the groom's suite burst open and Nolan Pierce walked into the room. The security guards walked Marcus Hale toward the exit with one hand on each arm. Their grip was firm, not violent, but deliberate, the kind of hold designed to move a body without leaving a mark. Marcus didn't resist. His shoes made soft sounds on the marble. His eyes stayed forward. His breathing stayed even. Behind him, the reception hall hummed back to life like a machine that had been briefly interrupted. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked. The string quartet picked up where they had left off. A Chopin nocturne that felt absurdly gentle against what was happening near the door. Preston Sterling followed the guards at a comfortable distance, hands in his pockets, grinning like a man who had just won a hand of poker he'd rigged. He leaned toward a guest at a nearby table and said, loud enough for a dozen people to hear, "Can you believe that?" Just walked right in like he owned the place. The guest, a man in a three-piece suit with a Patek Philippe glinting at his wrist, chuckled, "Bold move. Bold." Preston scoffed. "Stupid. You'd think they'd at least dress the part if they're going to crash a Sterling wedding." The man raised his glass. To standards. Preston clinked it. They both drank. At another table, a woman in pearl earrings leaned toward her companion. "I actually feel a little bad for him." "Don't. If he didn't belong here, he didn't belong here." Lenora knows her guest list. "Still, did you see his face? He didn't even argue." "That's because he knew he was caught. Or maybe he just has dignity." The companion frowned. "Don't be dramatic, Helen." Helen went quiet. She picked up her fork and moved a piece of salmon across her plate and said nothing else after that. Every table had its own version of what happened. Wedding crasher, con artist, confused caterer, homeless man who wandered in from the road. Nobody considered the possibility that Marcus Hale was exactly who he said he was. A guest of the groom, sitting at the table assigned to him, drinking water because a waiter had pulled the champagne tray away from his hand. A teenage girl at table 12 held her phone steady, filming the entire thing. Her Instagram live counter hit 5,000 viewers. The comments scrolled too fast to read. "Oh my God, they're dragging him out. This is so messed up. Someone do something. Is this real?" That poor man just stood there and took it. Hashtag wedding racism. Nobody in the room was doing anything. The comments online sounded brave. Inside the room, almost no one was willing to act. Lenora Sterling returned to her position near the head table. She smoothed the tablecloth. She checked the flower arrangements. She signaled for more champagne to be poured. Every gesture communicated the same thing. "This is over. Let us move on." But she kept glancing toward the exit. Something Douglas had said was rattling around in the back of her skull like a marble in a tin can. She pushed it down. Avery appeared briefly in the doorway to the bridal suite. She had heard the commotion. Her eyes scanned the room and found Preston near the exit, found the guards, found the man between them. "What's happening?" she whispered to a bridesmaid. "Some guy crashed the wedding. Your mom took care of it." Avery watched Marcus being led away. Something in his posture, the straightness of his back, the quiet dignity of his stride made her stomach turn. She had grown up watching her mother remove people from parties, from business deals, from her life. It had always been described as maintaining standards. For the first time, it looked like something else. She didn't intervene. She turned back into the bridal suite and closed the door. Preston wasn't done. He jogged ahead of the guards and positioned himself in front of Marcus, blocking the path. The guard stopped. Marcus stopped. "Hold on," Preston said. He was enjoying this. His eyes had the bright, restless look of a boy pulling wings off an insect, fascinated by his own cruelty. "Before you go, I just want to make sure you weren't planning on taking anything with you, were you?" Marcus looked at him. "Excuse me. I mean, you came in uninvited, sat at someone else's table, helped yourself to refreshments. I just want to make sure the silverware count checks out when we're done here." One of the guards shifted uncomfortably. He looked at his partner. Neither of them had signed up for this. "I didn't take anything," Marcus said. "Check his pockets," Preston said to the guards. The broad guard with the shaved head shook his head slightly. "Sir, we're not authorized to do that." I said, "Check his pockets." Preston's voice lost its playfulness. What replaced it was something older, something he had inherited alongside the trust fund and the family name. "My mother is paying your firm $8,000 for this event. You'll do what I tell you. Check his pockets." A silence opened in the hallway. The guard looked at Marcus. Marcus lifted his arm slightly, palms out. "Go ahead," Marcus said. "I have nothing to hide." The guard patted Marcus's jacket. Left side, right side, breast pocket, a folded handkerchief, trouser pockets, a wallet, a phone, a cab receipt. He held each item briefly, then returned them. "He's clean, sir." Preston stared at the wallet. Plain leather, worn at the edges. Nothing embossed, nothing designer. "Let me see that." Marcus's hand moved, not fast, but certain. He took the wallet from the guard's hand before Preston could reach it. "That's mine," Marcus said. The words were quiet, but they carried a weight that made Preston's extended hand stop in midair. For a moment, something flickered across Preston's face. Not shame. He didn't have the machinery for that. Frustration. The frustration of a bully who expected a victim and found instead a wall he couldn't crack. He recovered fast. "Whatever," Preston waved dismissively. "Get him out and make sure he doesn't come back. If he shows up at the door again, call the police." The guards resumed walking. Marcus resumed walking between them, steady, unhurried, as if this hallway were his to walk at his own pace. They passed the service corridor where kitchen staff watched through a half-open door. A young dishwasher, barely 20, dark-skinned, wearing a stained apron, locked eyes with Marcus for a brief moment. The boy's fists were clenched at his sides. Marcus gave him a small nod, almost imperceptible. The boy swallowed hard and looked away. They reached the main exit. The heavy oak doors were propped open. Beyond them, cool Connecticut air waited, filled with cricket song, the soft splash of the courtyard fountain, and the gleam of a pearl-white Rolls-Royce under iron lanterns. Preston held the door with a theatrical bow. "After you. Watch your step out there. Wouldn't want you to trip on the way back to whatever bus you rode in on." Marcus stepped through the threshold. The cool air touched his face. He stopped, took a breath, let it out slowly. Behind him, inside the hall, Douglas Pierce was gripping Lenora's arm hard enough to leave fingerprints. "Lenora, listen to me. That man is the founder of North Star Capital." Lenora pulled free. "I don't know what that is, and I don't care. It's a $12 billion investment firm. It funds Nolan's entire operation, every cent. Do you understand what I'm telling you? That man is the reason your daughter is marrying a billionaire." The color left Lenora's face like water draining from a sink. Her hand found the back of a chair. "You're lying. I met him. Twice. Once at the signing when North Star invested the first $100 million, once at a private dinner. Nolan calls him boss, not as a title because that's who he is." Lenora's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked toward the exit. Marcus was on the threshold. The guards stood on either side. The door was closing. "Stop them," she whispered. "Stop them now." But the room was loud. The quartet was playing. Champagne was pouring. And Lenora Sterling's whisper, for the first time in her life, wasn't loud enough to reach anyone who mattered. Then a door slammed open. Not the exit door, the groom's suite door. Nolan Pierce stood in the frame. Midnight blue tuxedo, white rose on his lapel, hair combed back, jaw locked. His eyes swept the room like searchlights and found the scene at the exit almost instantly. "Stop!" Every head in the room turned. "Get your hands off him!" Nolan's voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It cut. "Now!" Marcus stood on the threshold, 1 foot inside the hall, 1 foot on the stone outside, and turned to look at the groom. The string quartet stopped mid-note. The room held its breath. Nolan Pierce crossed the reception hall without slowing. His shoes struck the marble in sharp, rapid beats. Guests stepped aside without being asked. A waiter carrying a tray of canapes pressed himself against a pillar. The crowd parted the way water parts for a stone dropped from height. The guards released Marcus's arms before Nolan reached them. They didn't need to be told twice. Whatever authority Preston Sterling claimed over them dissolved the moment the groom spoke. Nolan reached Marcus at the threshold. For one breath, the two men stood face to face. Marcus, navy suit, creased shoes, empty hands. Nolan, midnight blue tuxedo, white rose on his lapel, a billion-dollar empire behind his name. Nolan reached forward and straightened Marcus's lapel, gently, carefully, the way a son adjusts his father's tie before a family portrait. Then he turned to face 300 silent guests. This man is Marcus Hale. Nobody moved. A champagne flute somewhere near table 6 slipped from someone's fingers and hit the linen with a muffled thud. He is the founder and chief executive officer of North Star Capital. His firm manages $12.4 billion in assets across 3 continents. When I was 23 years old, sleeping on my college roommate's couch, eating ramen for dinner 6 nights a week, every venture capital firm in this city told me no. Every single one. They looked at my pitch deck and they laughed. Nolan paused. His jaw tightened. His voice dropped half a register. One man didn't laugh. One man sat across from me in a diner. Not a boardroom. Not a corner office. A diner on 9th Avenue. And read every page of my pitch. Asked me questions for a long time. Then he wrote a check that changed my life. That man is standing right here. He pointed at Marcus. Every dollar that flows through Pierce Ventures originated from his investment. Every startup I turned around, every deal I closed, every magazine cover, every Forbes list, every invitation to every gala in this room, it all traces back to one decision that Marcus Hale made over a plate of scrambled eggs when nobody else on this earth believed in me. Nolan looked at Lenora. His eyes didn't waver. The dress you're wearing, Lenora. My wedding gift to Avery paid for it. The champagne your son is gulping. My account. The deposit on this estate, the flowers, the string quartet, the ice sculpture in the garden, mine. And every cent of mine exists because of him. He let the silence hold. You didn't just throw a stranger out of this wedding. You threw out the man who built everything you celebrated. You humiliated my boss at my wedding in front of 300 people. Lenora's hand gripped the back of a chair so hard the joints groaned. Her face had cycled through red, white, and finally settled on a shade of gray that matched the stone pillars behind her. Her lips parted. No words came. Preston stood near the exit, frozen mid-step. The theatrical bow was gone. The smirk was gone. What remained was something stripped and raw, the face of a man watching a building he'd built his confidence on collapse floor by floor. The man with the Patek Philippe at the nearby table stared into his champagne. He did not raise it. He did not toast to standards. Douglas Pierce stood behind Lenora's shoulder. His arms were crossed. His jaw was set. He said nothing. He didn't have to. His silence was the loudest sound in the room. Avery had slipped out of the bridal suite during the speech. She stood near the kitchen entrance in her white gown, both hands over her mouth. Mascara-tinted tears left dark streaks on the French lace of her bodice. She had seen it through a crack in the door and closed that door and gone back to adjusting her veil. The weight of that choice pressed down on her now, visible in her bent shoulders, her shaking hands, the way she couldn't lift her eyes from the floor. Nolan turned back to Marcus. The hall was so quiet you could hear the crickets in the garden through the open door. "I'm sorry," Nolan said. Not to the room, just to Marcus, quiet enough that only Marcus could hear. "I should have been out here." Marcus put a hand on Nolan's shoulder, firm, steady. "You're here now." "They had no right?" "No, they didn't. I'm going to fix this." Marcus looked at him, really looked. The way a mentor looks at someone he bet everything on when nobody else would. Something in his expression shifted. Not pain, not triumph. Recognition. The recognition that Nolan Pierce had become exactly the kind of man Marcus always believed he could be. "Don't let this ruin your night," Marcus said. "You're getting married. Some things matter more than a party." Lenora took a half step forward. Her voice cracked. "Nolan, we didn't know. If we had known who he was." "That's the problem, Lenora." Nolan's voice stayed level. He didn't need volume. The words did the work on their own. You didn't need to know who he was. You just needed to be decent. The word landed like a gavel on marble. Lenora stopped. The string quartet did not resume. The champagne went flat in its flutes. 300 people who had watched a man be stripped of his dignity now sat inside the wreckage of their own complicity. Every guest who had laughed at Preston's champagne joke. Every guest who had whispered that Lenora was handling it. Every guest who had filmed and done nothing. Every guest who had turned a shoulder, studied a napkin, and decided it wasn't their business. They sat in their silk and their diamonds and their silence. And Marcus Hale buttoned his jacket with one hand, walked back across the marble floor with that same steady stride, and sat down at table 19. His water glass was still empty. Nobody rushed to fill it. He folded his hands on the ivory tablecloth and waited. What followed unfolded like a controlled demolition. Nolan Pierce pulled out his phone. He did not leave the room. He did not lower his voice. He stood at the center of the reception hall in his tuxedo at his own wedding and made 3 phone calls. The first was to his attorney. Pull every active contract between Pierce Ventures and Sterling Properties. All of them. Effective immediately. Lenora's mouth opened. "Nolan, you can't." "I just did." The second call was to his chief of staff. "Cancel the joint development project in Westport. Freeze the escrow. I want Sterling Properties removed from every pipeline document as soon as possible." Preston stepped forward. His face had found a color again, an ugly red flushed with equal parts anger and dawning terror. "You're overreacting. We didn't know who he was." "If you just told us." "I shouldn't have had to tell you." Nolan didn't look at him. "That's the whole point, Preston. You shouldn't need a man's net worth to treat him like a human being." The third call was to his publicist. "Get ahead of this. There's video everywhere. I want a statement out as soon as possible. My name, my words, no spin." He hung up. Lenora sank into a chair, her emerald dress pulled around her like water. The diamonds at her collar caught the light, but they didn't sparkle the same way anymore. Nothing about her sparkled. She looked like a woman watching her empire crack in real time. "You're destroying our family," she whispered. "No," Nolan said. "You did that when you chose how to treat him." Douglas Pierce sat down next to Lenora, not to comfort her, to make sure she didn't leave before the consequences finished arriving. Across the room, Marin, the wedding planner, was fielding calls. Her phone had not stopped buzzing since the first video hit Twitter. 4 media outlets had already reached out. A reporter from the Hartford Courant was in the parking lot. Preston tried one more time. He straightened his pocket square, an absurd gesture given the circumstances, and approached Nolan with his hands raised, palms out, like a man approaching a wild animal. "Listen, let's be rational about this. We were protecting the family. There was an unknown man at the wedding. We took precautions, that's all." Nolan finally looked at him. Precautions. He let the words sit between them. Is that what you call checking a black man's pockets in front of 300 people? Is that what you call offering to count the silverware? Is that what you call telling him? People like you don't drink champagne. Preston's mouth closed. Those are precautions, Preston. Those are choices, and they're the kind of choices that show everyone exactly who you are. A guest at table 3 stood up, collected his wife's clutch, and walked toward the exit. He didn't say goodbye. 2 more couples followed soon after, then a table of 4, then 3 singles from the bar. The exodus was quiet. No one made a scene. They simply calculated the cost of being associated with the Sterling family after what had happened there, and decided the math didn't work. Marcus remained at table 19. A waiter, a different one from before, approached him with a glass of champagne on a silver tray. The waiter's hand was shaking. "Mr. Hale, can I get you anything?" Marcus looked at the champagne, then at the waiter. "Water's fine," he said. "Thank you." The waiter brought water, with ice this time, and a lemon wedge. Avery crossed the room. Her white gown trailed behind her. Her makeup was ruined. She stopped in front of Marcus and stood there for a few quiet moments before she could speak. "Mr. Hale, I am so sorry." Marcus looked up at her. "You're the bride." "Yes." "Congratulations." Avery's lip trembled. "I watched them do it. I was in the other room. I saw through the door, and I did nothing." Marcus studied her face. "You're doing something now." "It's not enough." "No," Marcus said. "It isn't. But it's a start." Avery wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Her engagement ring, a 4-carat diamond from Nolan, caught the light. She looked at it as if seeing it for the first time. "He changed because of you," she said. "Nolan, he's a better man because of you." Marcus said nothing. He just nodded, once. Avery walked back to Nolan. He took her hand. They stood together in the middle of the wreckage of their wedding reception, and for one brief moment, they looked like the only 2 people in the room who understood what really mattered. Outside, the first news van pulled into the gravel drive. The fountain kept splashing. The crickets kept singing. The Rolls-Royce sat gleaming under the lanterns. The consequences were only beginning. The video reached the internet before the cake was cut. The teenager at table 12, her name was Tessa, though no one would remember that detail for long, had streamed the entire incident live. By the time the first news van parked on the gravel drive outside the Ashbourne estate, her clip had been viewed 200,000 times. Soon afterward, it crossed 3 million. Soon after that, it passed 12 million and was still climbing. The headline practically wrote itself. Billionaire groom's mentor humiliated at wedding as bride's family faces accusations of discrimination. Major outlets began running versions of the story almost immediately. Cable news network picked up the story soon afterward. The New York Times had a reporter on the ground in Connecticut soon after. The Hartford Courant ran a front-page feature with a photograph of the Ashbourne estate, under the caption, "The Wedding That Became a Reckoning." The internet moved with its usual speed and appetite. It found names. It found faces. It found LinkedIn profiles and company websites and old social media posts that should have been deleted years ago. Preston Sterling's Instagram was excavated almost immediately. Photos of him on yachts and at country clubs. One old post showed a picture of his Porsche with the caption, "Some people are born to lead. The rest should learn to follow." It drew 30,000 replies almost immediately. Most unprintable. Lenora Sterling's charitable legacy was re-examined under a new lens. An investigative blogger discovered that Sterling Properties had never, throughout its long history, hired a black executive above assistant manager. The finding went viral under hashtag Sterling Standards. The hashtag Justice for Marcus trended nationally for a while. Sterling Properties felt the impact almost immediately. 3 major clients pulled contracts soon afterward. A development deal in Greenwich, valued at $68 million, collapsed when the investment group cited reputational risk. The firm's largest lender issued a formal review notice. Stock in their real estate investment trust dropped 9% in a single session. The board of directors convened an emergency session. Preston Sterling was asked to resign. When he refused, loudly with threats of a lawsuit, the board voted 7-2 to terminate him. His severance was reduced to the contractual minimum. His company car was collected from the parking garage soon afterward. While he watched from his office window, Lenora held a board seat and the title of Chairwoman Emerita. The board asked her to step down from all public-facing roles until further notice. She agreed. 3 of her closest allies had voted against her. The social consequences followed the financial ones like dominoes. Lenora was quietly removed from the planning committee of the Greenwich Charity Gala, an event she had co-chaired for many years. Her membership at the Ashbourne Country Club was placed under review. Longtime friends stopped returning phone calls. Invitations to dinner parties arrived with diminishing frequency and then stopped arriving at all. Preston fared worse. His gym membership was technically still active, but no one would spot him. His regular table at Morton's Steakhouse was suddenly always booked. A woman he had been dating for a short time ended things over text. 4 words. I saw the video. Marcus Hale, meanwhile, said almost nothing. His publicist released a single statement soon after the wedding. It was 4 sentences long. I attended the wedding of Nolan Pierce, a man I've had the privilege of mentoring for many years. During the reception, I was asked to leave by members of the bride's family. I hold no personal grudge. I do hope this moment encourages all of us to examine the assumptions we make about people based on how they look. That was it. No lawsuit, no press tour, no interview circuit, no book deal. Marcus Hale had spent decades building North Star Capital into one of the most respected investment firms in the Western Hemisphere. And he had done it the same way he handled the wedding incident, with patience, with precision, and without once raising his voice. But he did make one move. Not long after the wedding, North Star Capital announced the creation of the Hale Fellowship, a $50 million scholarship and mentorship fund for young entrepreneurs from underrepresented communities. The announcement did not reference the wedding. It didn't need to. Everyone who read it understood exactly what it meant. The fund quickly received 12,000 applications. Nolan Pierce was the first outside donor. He matched Marcus's $50 million with another $50 million of his own. At the press conference announcing the combined $100 million commitment, a reporter from Bloomberg asked him why. Nolan looked directly into the camera. Because years ago, a man I had never met sat across from me in a diner and decided I was worth believing in. He didn't ask what school I went to. He didn't ask what my father did for a living. He didn't ask what I look like. He looked at my work and he saw potential. That's the kind of world I want to build. That's the only kind worth building. The clip quickly reached 42 million views. Avery Pierce, who had taken Nolan's name after the wedding, later released her own public statement. It was longer than Marcus's and far more raw. She wrote about growing up in the Sterling household, about the values she was taught to display, and the prejudices she was taught to ignore. She wrote about watching Marcus Hale be escorted out of her wedding and choosing to close the bridal suite door. She wrote about shame. I was raised to believe that silence was politeness, she wrote. I now understand that silence in the face of cruelty is participation. The essay was republished by The Atlantic and read aloud on 2 podcasts. Avery received 6,000 messages, some angry, most grateful. Many from people who said her words forced them to examine their own silences. The young dishwasher from the kitchen, the one who had locked eyes with Marcus in the service corridor, later applied for the Hale Fellowship. His name was Andre Bennett. He was 20 years old. He had dropped out of community college to work double shifts and support his mother after her hip surgery. His application essay was 1 paragraph long. It read, I watched a man walk through the worst kind of disrespect without losing who he was. I want to build something that makes that kind of strength unnecessary. Andre Bennett was accepted into the inaugural cohort of 24 fellows. Marcus Hale called him personally to deliver the news. Later, Marcus Hale sat in his office on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. The office was large but not lavish. A wooden desk, a leather chair that had been reupholstered twice, framed photographs on the wall, not of buildings or magazine covers, but of people. Mentees, fellows, young entrepreneurs who had sat across from him in diners and conference rooms and living rooms and heard the same words. "Tell me what you've got." On his desk, next to a stack of quarterly reports, sat a wedding invitation, ivory cardstock with gold lettering. The edges were still crisp. He had never thrown it away. Below his window, Manhattan hummed, taxis and delivery trucks, steam rising from grates, a city that never stopped moving, never stopped deciding who belonged and who didn't. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Nolan. Andre Bennett just closed his first round, $2.3 million. He called me crying. Marcus read the message, read it again. Then he set the phone down and looked at the photograph on the far wall. A young man in a stained apron standing outside a commercial kitchen, squinting against the sun. Andre had sent it the day he was accepted into the fellowship. He had written on the back, Day 1. That was back at the beginning. Now Andre had investors, a team of 4, and a prototype for a meal prep delivery service targeting food deserts. One venture partner called his pitch the clearest articulation of mission-driven business I've heard in 20 years. Marcus was not surprised. He had seen something in Andre's eyes in that service corridor, the same thing someone had once seen in his own eyes decades ago in a tobacco field in South Carolina. Not ambition, something quieter. Refusal, the refusal to accept that the way things are is the way things have to be. Nolan and Avery's marriage survived the fallout. Not easily. The early period felt like a siege, arguments, scrutiny, therapy, but they held on. Avery resigned from her family's foundation and started her own nonprofit focused on diversity in the arts. She called it The Open Door. She didn't explain the name. She didn't need to. Lenora Sterling had not made a public appearance for a long while. Friends who had seen her said she looked smaller, thinner, older. Whether she had changed or simply retreated was a question nobody could answer yet. Change, the real kind, doesn't announce itself. It works slowly, like water on stone, and its shape is often visible only much later. Preston had moved to Florida. He told people he was consulting. He was not consulting. He was sitting in a rented condo in Boca Raton, refreshing his Google alerts and waiting for the internet to forget him. The internet was not forgetting him. Nolan Pierce visited Marcus once, after the wedding. He brought a bottle of whiskey and an apology that came out slowly and without interruption. Marcus listened to the whole thing. Then he poured 2 glasses and they sat in silence and drank. Some things don't need more words than that. The Hale Fellowship completed its inaugural cycle with 24 fellows, 19 of whom launched businesses. 3 of those businesses were already profitable. 1 had been acquired. Andre Bennett's was growing. Marcus attended every graduation. He shook every hand. He looked every fellow in the eye and said the same thing he had said to Nolan Pierce in a diner long before. I believe in what you're building. Now, go prove me right. The story of what happened at the Ashbourne estate was told and retold, shared and reshared, until it became something larger than what happened to one man at one wedding. It became a mirror. People saw themselves in it. Sometimes as Marcus, sometimes as Avery, sometimes uncomfortably as Lenora or Preston, sometimes as the guests at the other tables holding their champagne, saying nothing. That was the part that stuck. Not the wealth, not the reveal, not the billionaire groom calling a man in a Navy suit his boss. The silence. All those people, all that silence. What would you have done if you had been standing in that room? Would you have spoken, even if your voice shook? Would you have crossed the room, even if everyone else stayed seated? Or would you have told yourself that someone else would handle it? That question matters because most moments that reveal our character do not arrive with warning. They appear quietly, in a hallway, at a dinner table, in a workplace, in a family conversation, or in a crowded room where one person is being treated as though they matter less. In those moments, kindness is rarely dramatic. Sometimes it is simply refusing to laugh. Sometimes it is asking whether someone is all right. Sometimes it is saying, "This is not fair." Sometimes it is standing beside a person who has suddenly found themselves standing alone. Marcus never needed the room to discover that he was wealthy before he deserved respect. That was the lesson Nolan understood so clearly. Human dignity is not something a person earns with a title, a bank account, a perfect suit, or an impressive name. It belongs to everyone before any of those things enter the conversation. The people in that room made choices. Some chose cruelty, some chose silence. Some realize too late that silence can carry consequences of its own, but the story also showed that people can choose differently after they fail. Avery could not undo the moment when she closed the door, but she could open another one. Nolan could not erase what happened to his mentor, but he could decide what he would stand for afterward. Marcus could have answered humiliation with bitterness, yet he chose to turn the experience into opportunity for people who had spent too much of their lives being overlooked. That does not mean forgiveness requires pretending nothing happened. It does not mean consequences are unkind. Responsibility and compassion can exist together. Real growth begins when we are honest about the harm our choices can cause, then do the patient work of becoming better. So perhaps the most important question is not whether we see ourselves as good people. It is what we do when being good costs us comfort, approval, convenience, or silence. Do we look away because speaking feels awkward? Do we wait until we learn someone's status before deciding they deserve respect? Or do we choose decency before we know who they are, what they own, or what they can do for us? Every person we meet is carrying a life we cannot fully see. A worn suit may hide extraordinary wisdom. A quiet worker may be building a future no one has noticed yet. A stranger at the edge of a room may be the very person whose presence will change someone else's life. We lose something important when we judge too quickly, and we gain something lasting when we give people the dignity we hope others would give us. The deepest strength in this story was not wealth, influence, or revenge. It was the ability to remain grounded when others tried to reduce a human being to an assumption. It was the courage to admit failure. It was the willingness to take responsibility. And it was the choice to use pain as a reason to create more opportunity, not more pain. That is something worth carrying into our own lives. We cannot control every room we enter, every opinion people form, or every mistake others make. But we can control the kind of person we become inside those moments. We can be slower to judge, quicker to listen, brave enough to speak, humble enough to apologize, and wise enough to understand that kindness is never wasted. Share this story with someone who may need that reminder. And if stories about courage, dignity, responsibility, second chances, and the quiet power of doing what is right mean something to you, subscribe and stay with us for more. Because in the end, the true measure of a person is not what they wear, what they drive, what they own, or how important the room believes they are. It is how they treat people who seem to have nothing to offer them. It is whether they choose compassion when indifference would be easier. And it is whether, after making a mistake, they have the courage to face it, learn from it, and leave the next person they meet with more dignity than they found them.